It was an ordinary Thursday morning in a small courtroom in Call County, Alabama. The ceiling fans groaned overhead, spinning lazily. The faint mix of mildew and burnt coffee lingered in the air. Most of the people seated in the gallery were familiar faces, folks used to settling parking disputes or noise complaints, not the kind who witnessed military trials. But that morning felt different. The door creaked open, and in walked General Reginald Voss. Tall, composed, and dressed in his immaculate Class A military uniform, he moved with calm purpose. His polished brass shone under the dull courtroom lights. As he walked to the defense table, alone without an attorney, the room went quiet. Not out of respect, but confusion. A whisper echoed from behind the clerk's desk. "That's him." But Voss didn't react. He stood still, calm, hands resting gently on the table. At the prosecution's table, Officer Trent Dillard leaned back, chewing gum, smirking. "Look at him," he said to his attorney, loud enough for others to hear. "Trying to play soldier. That uniform doesn't mean anything in here." The judge hadn't entered yet. Clerks bustled about. A local reporter scribbled notes without bothering to bring a camera. No one expected anything significant. After all, in Cavell, the cop always won. A young court bailiff nervously approached General Voss. "Sir, do you have legal representation today?" Voss replied evenly. "No. I'll speak for myself." Dillard scoffed from across the room, arms folded, the embodiment of small-town authority. For him, it was more than just law. It was image. And here stood a black man, alone in a southern courtroom, facing a charge filed by a white officer. The odds seemed clear. The judge finally entered. "Be seated." Judge Penley, an aging man with paper-thin skin and glasses that wouldn't stay on his nose, reviewed the charges aloud. Obstruction, failure to comply, interfering with a lawful traffic stop. "General Voss," he said, "I understand you wish to proceed without a lawyer?" "Yes, Your Honor," Voss replied with a firm nod. The prosecutor began reading from the arrest report. According to Officer Dillard, Voss was aggressive, uncooperative, and refused to exit his vehicle, escalating a routine stop into a tense confrontation. But the description didn't match the quiet, composed man standing before them. Dillard reclined in his chair, already thinking about lunch, his smirk growing. When the judge turned to Voss, asking if he had a response, the general said calmly, "I'd like to request a 5-minute recess to make a phone call." A murmur stirred through the courtroom. That was unusual. "Any particular reason?" the judge asked. "I need to make a phone call." From the prosecution table, Dillard muttered with a smirk, "Sure, call your mom." The judge, either not hearing or choosing to ignore him, granted the recess. Voss turned and walked out with measured calm, not a hint of panic in his stride. And that walk, so deliberate, so grounded, made people wonder. Maybe this man was more than he seemed. In the quiet hallway, Voss didn't pace or fumble with his phone. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a matte black government-issued device. No logos, just purpose. He dialed a number from memory. A voice answered. "Major Baines. This is Voss. I need a field case review team deployed to Call County Courthouse, Alabama. Immediate priority, improper detainment and defamation involved." A pause. "Understood. We're en route." No more words were needed. Voss slid the phone back into his jacket and looked through the window into the courtroom. Inside, Dillard was still spinning his version of the story. "I told him to roll the window down. He hesitated, then reached for something. I feared for my safety, had my hand on my weapon, ordered him out again. He started rambling about clearance and national security. Typical sovereign citizen behavior." The gallery chuckled. Dillard grinned. The prosecutor continued reading. Mr. Voss became agitated. He refused to place his hands on the vehicle and demanded the officer's badge number in an aggressive tone. When restrained, he pulled away and said, "You don't know who you're dealing with." The courtroom shifted at that line. It sounded cliché, like something from a movie, not something this composed man would say. "General Voss," the judge asked, "did you say that?" Voss answered, calm as ever, "I did not." "You're saying it was fabricated?" "I never raised my voice. I never made threats. If a recording exists, it will prove that." Dillard interrupted, suddenly less confident. Uh, Body cam failed. Battery died. Dash cam was down too. Maintenance backlog. The judge frowned. Convenient. Then he leaned in again. Did Mr. Voss ever reach for a weapon? Number. But he refused lawful orders. That's a threat. Meanwhile, Voss sat silently, not defensive, just waiting. Then the door opened again. Voss re-entered, taking his seat without looking at Dillard. But something had changed. An energy shift. Instincts flared. Then the side door opened again. Two men in sharp suits walked in, badges visible. One carried a thick folder. The other scanned the room like a hawk. Behind them came a man in dark green uniform, Colonel Ira Wexley. He moved with the poise of a man used to briefing generals, not small-town judges. They approached the bench. The lead agent handed the judge a sealed envelope. Priority documentation for immediate review under Title 10 jurisdiction. Judge Penley blinked. I'm sorry, under what authority? Colonel Wexley stepped forward. U.S. Army Office of General Counsel. I've been assigned to represent General Voss in a supervisory role as of 10 minutes ago. My credentials are inside. The judge opened the folder. Inside were military orders, deployment logs, satellite GPS timestamps, all proving that Voss had been on a classified assignment when the traffic stop occurred. The report didn't just punch holes in the prosecution's story, it tore it apart. Voss had been detained illegally, and Officer Dillard? The documents revealed prior misconduct complaints, most swept under the rug. The prosecutor stood flustered. This is highly irregular. We haven't reviewed this material. Judge Penley removed his glasses. You've had 2 weeks to review your officer's history, yet here we are. The tension in the room could be cut with a knife, and it was only just beginning. I will speak on my behalf, he said, voice steady. He looked directly at the judge. I was pulled over on a 2-lane road just outside Pinarove. I showed my military credentials immediately. I told the officer I was en route to a classified briefing, a route approved and cleared by the Department of Defense. I wasn't speeding. My registration and insurance were in order. I remained calm and respectful. I asked why I was being stopped. He paused. That's when Officer Dillard's tone changed. The moment he saw my uniform, he accused me of lying. He demanded I exit the vehicle without cause. I asked for clarification. He reached for his handcuffs. I didn't resist. I requested his badge number. He ignored me. As he restrained me, he said, "You should know better than to act like you're above the law." A quiet murmur swept through the courtroom. But I wasn't acting above the law, Voss continued. I followed every rule. He returned to his seat. No drama, no performance, just the facts. Judge Penley turned to the prosecutor. Do you wish to proceed in light of the new evidence? The prosecutor hesitated. We'd like a brief recess to review. No, Penley cut in. You've had more than enough time. Denied. He closed the folder in front of him, a quiet exhale through his nose. We continue. From that point on, it wasn't Dillard steering the narrative. He was scrambling to keep it from skidding off the road. Most people in that room only saw a uniformed man. Black, composed, alone. But the documents in Judge Penley's folder told a deeper truth. Reginald Voss was not just another officer. He had led over a dozen international deployments, worked under NATO command in the Balkans, coordinated evacuation corridors during the initial Kandahar withdrawal. He held multiple security clearances. One of his hostage recovery strategies had saved 5 Americans in Sudan and earned him a same-night briefing with top U.S. cabinet officials. In his jacket pocket, he carried the Defense Superior Service Medal, not to wear, but as a reminder. Recognition only matters when you stay grounded. He'd started out in ROTC at a small Arkansas college. No shortcuts, no headlines, no politics, just discipline, quiet resolve. People didn't write books about Voss. They called him when things fell apart. And yet here he sat, surrounded by the scent of old linoleum and air freshener, accused of being dangerous, defiant, untrustworthy. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years identifying threats. But the most dangerous ones? They weren't loud. They rewrote facts with a pen. They rewarded silence. They whispered into the corners of power and changed the story before it was even told. Dillard's version was unraveling, piece by piece. But Voss didn't celebrate. He knew better. Accountability doesn't arrive with applause. It builds slowly, through documents, patterns, records that can't be ignored. In the gallery, a man whispered, "You think he pulled strings to get those agents here?" A woman answered just as quietly, "No, he made one call." That was the truth. Voss hadn't used favors. He followed protocol. The system responded, not for who he was, but because his report deserved a response. Back at the bench, Judge Penley continued flipping through the folder. Service records, performance reviews, letters from generals, secretaries, even a former vice president. But it was the GPS data that cut deepest. Time-stamped logs proved Voss was exactly where he said he was, on a route authorized by the Army. No detours, no speeding, no erratic behavior. The data showed his vehicle had remained stationary for 12 full minutes, until the precise moment Dillard put him in the cruiser. Then Penley asked the question, "Officer Dillard, if the vehicle was parked for 12 minutes, why did you state that Mr. Voss resisted arrest?" Dillard shifted in his seat. He refused to comply. He kept arguing. Arguing? Or asking questions? Penley's voice was cool. Dillard blinked. It felt aggressive. Penley placed his pen down. Feeling something doesn't make it fact. In the back, Colonel Wexley remained silent, arms crossed, gaze unflinching. The courtroom had changed. It wasn't just about legalities anymore. It was about perception, about what people assume when someone stands alone, especially someone who doesn't match their idea of belonging. It was about stories rewritten to fit the comfort of power. And it was about a man who spent his life following the rules, only to be punished for existing in a space someone else decided wasn't his. But Voss didn't shrink. He never had. And now, as the truth gathered weight, the room began to sit up straighter. The air felt different, like the hush before a storm, subtle, heavy. Dillard tapped his pen, no longer at ease. His attorney leaned forward now, no longer relaxed. Judge Penley glanced once more at the folder Colonel Wexley had delivered. The facts were no longer in dispute, and the story was no longer Dillard's to tell. Judge Penley picked up a stapled packet labeled Internal Review Summaries. He flipped to a marked section and paused, raising a brow. "Officer Dillard," he said, calm but pointed, "do you recall a civilian complaint filed in August of last year involving a 17-year-old named Kelvin Rock?" Dillard blinked. "Not specifically, Your Honor. We get a lot of reports in this job. That one alleged an unlawful search during a traffic stop. No warrant, no probable cause. The department settled it quietly." Penley's tone didn't change, but the weight behind it pressed harder. "Ring a bell?" Dillard shifted. "That was handled by my supervisor. I wasn't reprimanded." Penley nodded slowly. "And in May the year before that, an elderly woman stopped on her way home from church. Her son said you threatened to tow her car because she didn't exit fast enough. Do you remember that one?" "I remember," Dillard said, clearing his throat. "She was parked illegally." "She was waiting in a grocery store lot for her granddaughter," Penley replied, lifting the document. "Not obstructing traffic, not on a public road, just parked." The courtroom had gone quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't idle. It was focus. Something was unraveling, and everyone could feel it. Penley's voice sharpened. "You've had 5 civilian complaints in the past 2 years. 4 settled out of court, 1 dismissed on a technicality. None of them made it into the case file submitted to this court." The prosecutor's face turned red. "Your Honor, we didn't believe those complaints were relevant to the current charges." "Then you didn't look hard enough." Penley turned slightly toward the empty jury box. There was no jury in this trial, but the gesture was deliberate. The message was clear. People were watching now. Dillard wasn't just a cop on the stand. He was under the microscope. "General Voss," Penley asked, "did Officer Dillard state why he stopped you?" Voss nodded. "He said I failed to signal before a turn." Penley exhaled through his nose. "And was there a turn?" "There was not," Voss answered evenly. Penley turned to Colonel Wexley. "Colonel, your office conducted a preliminary review. Did you find anything else of note?" Wexley stepped forward and placed another folder on the bench. "Body cam footage, Your Honor, from a second officer who arrived after the initial stop. He didn't intervene, but his camera captured key portions of the exchange. Mr. Voss asked for Officer Dillard's badge number 3 separate times. He remained calm, both hands visible at all times. Dillard stiffened. His attorney leapt up. Objection! That footage wasn't disclosed. This is a surprise submission. Penley didn't flinch. Are you objecting to evidence your own client never told you existed? The lawyer sat back down quickly. Penley faced Dillard again. Why wasn't this mentioned? Why wasn't the footage submitted with the original report? Dillard looked at the floor. I didn't know his camera was on. You didn't ask. No answer. The room had fully shifted now. Dillard had expected the usual. A few unchecked exaggerations, a routine hearing, a fast resolution. But this case wasn't routine, and Voss wasn't just another defendant, and now the court wasn't just listening, it was judging, but not Voss. Each page Penley turned chipped a little more away from Dillard's credibility. Now Dillard sat stone still. No gum, no leg bounce, no whispers to his attorney. Just that growing look of quiet panic behind the eyes. Penley adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, fingers steepled. Let's go back to the moment of the stop. You claim Mr. Voss resisted, that he refused to comply. But the footage shows him asking for your badge number, standing calmly with both hands visible. How do you explain the contradiction? Dillard hesitated. His lawyer nudged him. I must have remembered it differently, he said. It felt like the situation was escalating. Penley tilted his head. Or you escalated it. There's a difference. Voss didn't move, but his presence spoke volumes. He wasn't trying to sway the room. He was letting the truth speak for itself. Penley turned to the prosecutor. Do you still wish to proceed, or are you ready to concede? This case is collapsing. The prosecutor opened his mouth, then closed it again. He rifled through papers. A delay, not a decision. Colonel Wexley stepped forward again. Your Honor, if I may, we would like to officially submit a summary of General Voss's travel orders, GPS logs, and clearance. His detainment resulted in the loss of a secure operational window for a classified briefing. It caused measurable disruption at a federal level. The courtroom absorbed that like cold water hitting hot coals. This wasn't just a legal failure. It was a national security concern. Penley took the folder and flipped through. Then slowly he looked back at Voss. General, how long have you served? 42 years, sir. Ever been arrested before? No, sir. Ever had a complaint for misconduct? No, sir. Do you believe you were targeted by Officer Dillard? Voss paused. Not for effect, but for accuracy. I believe, he said quietly. He saw my face before he saw my badge. The courtroom didn't erupt. There was no outburst, no gasp. Just truth settling into the room like dust in sunlight, undeniable and clear. It didn't need explanation. It simply existed. Solid, weighty, undeniable. Dillard lowered his gaze to the floor. Throughout the courtroom you could feel the shift. People who had walked in anticipating a routine disciplinary review now sat silently, reevaluating everything. They weren't looking at a man who defied orders anymore. They were looking at a decorated veteran who had done everything his country had asked of him, only to be brought down by someone who couldn't see past a uniform, or worse, refused to. Judge Penley pinched the bridge of his nose. In 23 years on this bench, he said slowly, I've heard every kind of case you can name, fraud, assault, theft, but rarely have I faced one that made me question the very backbone of this courtroom like this has. He turned to Dillard, whose knuckles were white against the edge of the table. You're not just being reviewed anymore. Effective immediately, your actions are being referred to the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation for procedural misconduct and false reporting. A badge loses all meaning when the one wearing it betrays what it stands for. Dillard didn't argue. He couldn't. His attorney leaned in, murmured something low. Dillard gave a slow, resigned nod. Penley turned his attention back to Voss. General, I can't undo what's happened here today, but I hope that accountability, even if delayed, brings some clarity. Voss rose to his feet. Your Honor, I didn't come for revenge. I came for the truth. The judge regarded him quietly, then nodded. And you got it. He lifted the gavel. All charges against Reginald Voss dismissed with prejudice. Case closed. The gavel struck wood. What followed wasn't applause or shock. It was understanding. The kind that settles in a room when something wrong has finally been called by its name. But the biggest change didn't happen on the bench. It happened in the eyes of the people watching. The courtroom emptied slowly. Not because they were asked to stay, because they didn't know how to leave. Many sat with arms folded, glancing between Dillard and Voss, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Dillard remained still, shoulders sagging, jaw clenched. His badge had been removed by a bailiff, his weapon taken prior to the hearing. All standard once an internal referral kicks in. But the look on his face wasn't panic. It was disbelief, like he had just realized no one was coming to sweep this away for him. Voss stepped back. The silence lengthened. He turned to Colonel Wexley, who gave him a nod. No handshake, no gesture, just mutual understanding between two men who'd operated in worlds where mistakes cost lives, not time. Then for the first time that day, Voss addressed Dillard directly. His voice was calm, his posture still. When someone asks for your badge number, it isn't an attack. It's a right. You thought I was challenging your authority. I was protecting myself. Dillard said nothing. Voss added, I've been in war zones where people didn't speak the same language, but still managed mutual respect. You couldn't manage that in your own home country. Dillard looked away. He had no reply. Voss turned toward the exit. As he passed the gallery, a woman, gray-haired, middle-aged, stood up. General Voss, she called softly. I'm sorry this happened here. He paused, met her gaze. You didn't do this, but we allowed it. She swallowed. He continued. Letting something happen once doesn't define us. Letting it happen again does. She sat back down in silence. Outside, the world looked unchanged. Sunlight on asphalt, traffic humming along. But the rhythm of the town had shifted. On a bench nearby, two young men watched Voss pass. One leaned in. Man, I thought they were going to lock him up. The other nodded. Nah, he didn't flip it. He just let the truth do what it's supposed to. Inside the courthouse, Dillard sat motionless. His lawyer packed up quickly, eyes avoiding contact. The prosecutor fiddled with irrelevant papers. Judge Penley remained seated, lost in thought, perhaps retracing all the times he'd accepted a report at face value. There were no flashing lights outside, no cameras waiting. Voss wasn't interested in headlines. He walked alone to his car, but as he reached for the door, a teenager, backpack slung over one shoulder, phone in hand, approached. Sir? The teen said, unsure. Yes? Voss replied. I just wanted to thank you for how you handled that. Not many people could have. Voss smiled gently. Most people could. They just haven't had to yet. He got in, shut the door, and sat for a long moment. The silence inside wasn't oppressive. It was earned. The illusion had finally cracked, and what remained was something more honest. By late afternoon, word had spread far beyond Kabul. It started with a tweet, a blurry photo of Voss walking out of the courthouse, posted by a high school student tagging along on jury duty. The caption read, Guy in a uniform just got wrongfully arrested in Koval. One call, room flipped. Wild. Within hours, a Birmingham journalist reposted it. Then came Facebook shares, low-res videos of federal agents marching into a sleepy courthouse with thick folders and tight faces. Local news jumped in, then state outlets. By nightfall, it was top coverage in Alabama and Mississippi. With every share, disbelief deepened. How could this happen to a high-ranking Army officer on a random roadside? How do you screw up that badly and still smirk in court? No dash cam, no body cam, just a man's word against silence. The mayor issued a lukewarm statement about procedural integrity. The police declined to comment, citing an internal investigation. But people weren't waiting. They were talking, and this time they weren't whispering. In Coville, at Shaw's Diner, an older man stirred his coffee, watching the news. That boy embarrassed himself, he muttered. The waitress didn't look up. That boy's been embarrassing himself for years, she said. Today he just got caught. 3 booths down, a woman opened her purse and pulled out a yellowed article. A 2-year-old report about a high school traffic stop gone wrong. T. Dillard's name buried at the bottom. Back then, no one paid it much mind. Now they were all listening. At the high school field, parents stood watching practice, murmuring. One, a former MP, shook his head. Never seen a man stand that straight under pressure. Didn't even flinch, another said. Didn't need to. He knew what he stood on. At Fort Polk, officers accessed the case summary. One sergeant printed it, tacked it to a bulletin board. Someone scribbled above it in black Sharpie, "Know your rights, even when they act like you don't have any." Meanwhile, Dillard's name trended online, not for bravery, but for arrogance. Screenshots of past complaints, settlements, redacted files. Nothing new, but now they were being noticed, shared, compiled, discussed. Because this wasn't just about one man. It was about how quickly someone could be cast as a problem, even after decades of service. About how truth becomes fragile when challenged by unchecked authority, and how silence, when finally broken, can change everything. That evening, Colonel Wexley made a quiet call to Fort Polk. "He's fine," came the reply. "Just catching up on emails." Of course he was. No tour, no camera crews. Just back to the job. And maybe that's what people connected with most. Voss never asked for applause. He just needed the truth to stand. But he wasn't quite done yet. 2 days later, the Coville courthouse released a terse public statement. The charges against General Reginald Voss have been reviewed and dismissed. The matter involving Officer Trent Dillard has been referred to the Alabama SBI. No further comment at this time. No apology, no admission. Just bureaucracy catching its breath. But by then, the damage was done, and something stronger had taken its place. Voss returned to Fort Polk, sat at his desk, didn't hang anything, didn't frame a ruling. He didn't need to. Later that day, a letter arrived, no return address, just one page. I watched. At first, I believed him. I thought you were another man with an attitude. I was wrong. I'm sorry. No name. Just the words. Voss folded the paper and slid it into a drawer. Names didn't matter. The truth did.